And we are back. It's another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. And you might be asking yourself, why are we going so early in the week? Your boy is going on a vacation, well-earned, well-deserved, taking a little bit of time away. That being said, wanted to make sure, number one, jump on the content early this week. We've got an amazing card, UFC 273, stacked, right? They talk about it in the promos. They're not lying. We got a couple title fights. Obviously, there's some wide odds on those fights, but I think it's still very compelling when you've got two UFC title fights to top off the card. And on top of that, one of the hottest prospects in the UFC, Khamzat Chimaev. Is he real? Is he not real? We're going to find out because he's taking on the number 2 guy in the division, Gilbert Burns. Should be a great card. I'm very excited for it, fired up. And we're going to get started very soon here with my man, James Blissett, a professional sports bettor, one of the very sharpest in the game. And on top of that, he's coming off a great week last week. I'm coming off a tough week last week. James is our inspiration. He had a tough week the week before and bounced back. So I'm looking to do the same here. Friendly challenge from my man James to do so. And so we're going to bring in my man James here off the top. James, how are you, my friend? How you feeling? And are you excited about this card?
I'm feeling very good, brother. I'm very excited about this card. You know, I'm usually excited about all the cards, but when they take a week away from us and give us 1 week to just marinate, you know, the suspense goes a lot higher. The expectation goes a lot higher. And we're coming back with a banger as well. This isn't no fight night card, you know. This is UFC 273, serious card. So I'm looking forward to it. I'm glad you remember the friendly challenge because that's exactly what happened to me a couple of weeks ago. The worst weekend of my entire betting career, 20 units down. I've never lost that amount of money in my life. The next week, which was last week, came back with a 10-unit win. You did the same as me 1 week later, right? So I want you to come back with the same as me 1 week later, if not better. So 10-unit is the goal. And I hope you can do that, bro. And hopefully our discussion here, you know, we can help each other win some money as well as the viewers watching. So let's get it.
Absolutely, my man. That is always the goal. And we're going to get started here right off the top like we normally do. We break down these cards. We start at the bottom. We work our way all the way up to that main event. But before we get started, I just want to mention this show, all my content is brought to us by PrizePicks. If you guys are not familiar, the information's in the description box below. All you need to know, it's prop projections. It's not you against a million other people. It's one of these daily fantasy offerings where you just have to pick prop projections that you think are off. You could do it across different sports. You could do it in the world of MMA, takedowns, significant strikes, fight time, all the kind of things you would normally be betting on. You put a couple of them together. If you like them, you can use my promo code Liam. They're going to deposit match you 100% up to $100. So that information, like I mentioned, is in the description, as is the information for my guest, James. If you want to find out more information about his betting service, if you want to find out more information about his YouTube, his Instagram, all the places you can find him on the internet, I encourage you guys to check that out as well in the description box below. But with all that housekeeping aside, want to shout out our friends in the chat. My man Gordo is here to break down these fights with us early. My man Salt Dirt says Clint sent me. Shout out my man Clint. Another one about to come on this winning comeback train. So shout out my man Clint from Die Hard. Another one of these grinders doing this week to week. Never easy, but we're excited to start this week with a local fighter in terms of my interest here, Julio Arce. He is a Tiger Schulman's representative, and unfortunately he's coming off of a tough out last time in the UFC. And we've seen, the evolution of Song Yadong, but we've also seen that, unfortunately, that path had to go through my man, Julio Arce. So he's looking to get back on the winning track here. He's got a much less experienced opponent in Daniel Willycat Santos. However, it's not to say that this is going to be an easy fight. I do think that this is a dangerous newcomer. I don't think it's going to be an easy matchup. And we also got to consider he's making a relatively quick turnaround here. I know that we just saw Song Yadong get back in the octagon, but that was a November fight. So about 5 months turnaround here. And, Julio Arce is a little bit older for this division, currently looking at 32 years of age. And so it's not old by any means, but at bantamweight, guys tend to age out of their prime a little bit earlier. And he does have a decent bulk of fights behind his name now, over 20 professional fights. So, it's time for him to get moving in the division here if he wants to make a run. And I'm hopeful he can make something happen here. How do you rate his chances this weekend against Daniel Santos?
Weird fight. We got someone like Julio Arce who's been fighting at fairly the top of the division, that top 10 For most of his career, you know, he shows fights over Hakeem Dawodu, obviously Song Yadong last time out, Andre Ewell, Julian Erosa, Shayman Moraes, Dan Ige. You know, these type of people are established UFC fighters. You know, there's a couple people in there I mentioned who are no longer with the UFC. I mean, Shayman Moraes. But he's been fighting at this high level for most of his career. You know, that Ige fight was 4 years ago now, and we know Dan Ige is one of the best in the world. But he's fighting a newcomer, right? We don't see that too often. You know, when you got a debuting fighter, they don't usually fight a fighter as established as Julio Arce, right? Now, when we look at the fighter who's coming in, his name is Daniel Santos. Mental nickname as well, Willycat. I haven't heard that one before, but shout out to his nickname creator, because that's a bit of a strange one. But anyway, Daniel Willycat Santos, right? We look at his style. He seems to be a decent fighter. You know, he's an out-and-out striker. Does not go for takedowns. He goes for spinning back kicks. You know, I've seen him throw some crazy strikes. Seems to have a lot of power in his hands, although I haven't seen him get any standing knockouts with his hands. You know, I've seen a few with his kicks, but he is in a bantamweight division, so we have to remember that. You know, there's not that many people in the bantamweight division that get standing knockouts with their hands, men's or women's. You know, even in the men. So yeah, it's a tough one, because on the one hand, when I look at Daniel Santos as a fighter, he seems to be a decent fighter, right? He looks pretty solid, you know. The only time I've ever seen him lose minutes is when he's getting grapple fucked. And we look at Julio Arce. Is he going to grapple fuck anyone? No. I mean, he averages less than half a takedown per 15 minutes. So the guy doesn't go for takedowns. I'm not going to say it's out of the realm of possibility that he won't go for takedowns here, because he's a seasoned veteran in the fight game. You know, a lot of times they know what they need to do to win. So if he is getting beat on the feet, I definitely can see Arce going for a couple of takedowns. But off the bat, we're going to say that it probably is a striker versus striker matchup. Santos looks good, man. Spinning back kicks, as I said, very unorthodox. And he has good pocket boxing if it does turn into a bit more of an orthodox fight. If he isn't on the outside doing crazy spinning shit. If it does get in that close quarters, he has good pocket boxing. I've seen him rip the body. I've seen him go up top. He looks like a decent all-round fighter, right? The only thing is he's taken such a massive step up in skill level here that we honestly have no idea how he's going to perform. Most of the time, when a fighter is taking such a big step up in skill, you fade that fighter. Because 9 times out of 10, when it comes to the UFC level, they just don't win. It's very rare where a fighter's fighting lower level fighters and then they fight a top 15 UFC fighter and they win. It's extremely rare, you know. So off the top of the bat, I'm going to favor Julio Arce. You know, I get hyped up these times, you know, sometimes I talk too fast, man.
You got to slow it down sometimes. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. And I think Julio Arce needs to slow the fight down if he wants to win this one, because if it is chaotic, if Daniel Santos, I think he can land a few heavy strikes. But basically, to conclude my thoughts on this fight, I'm going to favor Arce because of the experience, the level he's been fighting at. But I will say that if Daniel Santos has been doing what he has been doing on the regional scene in the UFC, I would favor Daniel Santos. So what that means in layman's terms is that skill for skill, what I can see, I actually favor Daniel Santos. But the huge caveat is the skill that I see from Daniel Santos is against low level fighters, right? So anybody can look good against low level fighters. So it's a very hard one to know how he's going to perform against someone as good as Arce. I'm going to say Arce gets the win in this one, but I'm not running to the hills to back Julio Arce at -200, just because skill for skill, I do think Santos poses some heavy problems, and Arce is coming off that huge knockout loss against Song Yadong. So we're just going to leave it at the current line, but I'm picking Arce purely on principle.
You know what's funny to me here, James, is what stood out is you look at this guy's record, and you pointed out, you know, it's not often that you see a guy come in and kind of take on this difficult level of challenge, but you also see that he was scheduled to fight Timur Valiev. Valiev withdrew from that scheduled booking in October of last year, and then the same thing with Marcelo Rojo, and then Santos is the one that ended up pulling out of that fight. But he's been scheduled with a couple of guys, and Marcelo Rojo, obviously a little bit lower on the totem pole than a Timur Valiev or a Julio Arce, but still, I think that does speak volumes to what the UFC thinks that they're dealing with. in terms of the matchmaking that they're giving him. So yeah, a lot of guys come in and lose their UFC debut. So I'm not exactly excited to play Santos here either. But I do think it's a little bit of a quick turnaround from that Song fight. He took a good bit of damage there in a relatively short fight. So that's just something that I'm considering when I'm looking at a minus 200 tag on somebody. I think, I would outright favor him, but I'm not laying that number. I would say if the number continues to rise, then maybe I'll get involved at the Santos side. I would play into potential if it hit the plus 200 tag, something like that. But at plus 170, I'll probably just let this one go, James. With that being said, guys, we can let this one go and we'll move on to the next fight on the card here. And that will be in the 115-pound division. So Kay Hansen will be returning from 125 pounds in her last bout against Jasmine Jasudavicius, JJSP, if you will. Cashed a nice ticket there at the plus 200 figure in that fight. And that was, a big size matters in MMA type scene. And also, I thought it spoke to the fact that Kay Hansen, she was having success actually later in that fight by throwing her hands, but what she kept doing is forcing the grappling, the clinch exchanges where she was losing. So for me, that stood out a little bit as a low fight IQ type of a move from her. But with that being said, she also has an opponent here who's pretty green, Piera Rodriguez. She's coming off the Contender Series, and she looked good in her fight against Valeska Machado. But I do think that was also a fight that could have went the other way. A late takedown definitely helped swing that fight optically in her favor. I thought she was tiring in the third round, certainly. And I believe she's listed as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu blue belt. I didn't do a deeper investigation on Instagram. I like to see if that's up to date. For example, sometimes there's a promotion and you don't get to see that information. But I do think that, the superior ground fighter in this matchup is likely going to be Kay Hansen. So the question for me is she able to get this fight to the ground? Or is she able to get this fight won from her back? And I do think that Piera Rodriguez, what I noticed about her is that she likes to push those takedowns in her fight. She likes to get on top of people. And I do think that will open up lanes of opportunity. This is women's MMA. The armbar from guard is a little bit more common. And I do think that Kay Hansen is a pretty dangerous grappler. I don't think Jinh Frey is like a slouch on the ground. She's not an elite ground fighter either, but she's a seasoned vet of MMA and she got beat there. And you also have to remember Kay Hansen's very young in this game. So I do think that it's very possible she makes improvements fight over fight. Piera Rodriguez is coming in here for her first UFC bout, but she's going to be the older fighter. I think it's an interesting matchup. I think the underdog tag on Kay Hansen is a little bit interesting to me. I do think the line is flipped, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm compelled to hear what you have to say about this one, James. I haven't made any bets, but I was more interested in the Hansen side.
Yeah, quick shout out to the man Gold Caps here because he said Liam Rojo. So he's saying you look like Marcelo Rojo. That you do look like Marcelo Rojo, bro. I have to give that a little bit of a shout out. But yeah,
I appreciate it. I'll take it, man. Maybe that would be how my fights would go in the UFC too. I'd probably get the shit beat out of me, to be honest.
Yeah, but talking about this fight, I actually like Rodriguez a little bit in this fight, man. I think it's a close fight. I think I don't want to call it a mirror matchup, but I will say that they're very similar, these girls, just in terms of they do like to push the grappling when they can, and they have solid boxing, and they're very, very tough. That's really three comparisons that I can easily make for these girls. There's obviously a lot of differences as well, but they are three comparisons I'm making. I think they're fairly evenly matched in general as well. I don't think one is, head and shoulders above the other. And it exactly shows in the line, what I'm saying, because it was minus 110 for a while. Kay was favorite for a while. Pierre's now been favorite for a while. So it kind of shows that everybody else and the bookies don't really, have a strong opinion on this fight in terms of who's going to win it. But I actually do favor Piera Rodriguez in this fight. Now, she's obviously an undefeated fighter. She will push the grappling. She's got takedown upside. I think she's got very heavy hands. She drops a lot of opponents, or she hurts a lot of opponents, which is something you don't see in women's MMA in general, and definitely not in her weight class. That can actually go, the physicality, the tenacity which she has can go a long way in women's MMA. We've seen Jessica Andrade build a whole career off of tenacity and physicality, And in men's MMA, you can't build as much of a career off it because you're just going to get countered and sniped and put out, you know? Whereas in women's MMA, that power isn't coming back as much. So if you are brutal, tenacious, and you walk forward constantly and you eat fire to go forward, you can actually be a lot more successful. And that's what Piera Rodriguez does, right? She's very aggressive when she needs to be. And she has very heavy hands. And again, as I said, she can push the wrestling. So I've seen Kay taken down many times. I don't think it's going to be that hard for her to get taken down. Look, I do think there's some upside to her getting some transition, maybe getting a sweep or maybe getting an armbar from guard, like you said. I do think there is some credence to that. But again, it's a minus 110 on Rodriguez's side, right? She's not a minus 900. So there's always going to be some worries. But me personally, I edge Rodriguez. I will say that Kay Hansen, you know, she's on a bit of a downslope. Look, did she beat Corey McKenna? Maybe. But I cashed against Jasmine Jazadovicius like you did, plus 200. Shout out to JJ there. Yeah, I cashed there. And I'm looking to cash again, man. I do have a bet on Rodriguez. Kay Hansen, she seems like she might have one foot out the door. You know, she's posting OnlyFans every single day. I don't see too much training videos of her. She's always posting about her OnlyFans. I'm sure she's got many subscribers on that. You know, looking at her comments, there's loads of
probably
of people
makes more
there.
money doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
As sad as that is to say.
Yeah, she probably makes a hell of a lot more money. You know, there's a lot of men out here that will pay for pictures. You know, it seems kind of crazy, but there are a lot of these men out there that will do that. So, you know, she's got one foot out the door. She's got other businesses that she's involved in, right? It's not purely MMA. And with Rodriguez, she seems like she's got something to prove, man. I think she's happy to be in the UFC. You saw her on the Contender Series. She fought to the last bell. And I actually think Machado's a solid fighter who she fought. I don't think it was a scrub. You know,
I bet on Machado there, and I thought that Machado almost had her, but blew it late. I had like plus 700 on the decision and like crazy. Plus 333 on the money line. So yeah, that was the thing too, is like she was a massive favorite on Contender Series. I thought she didn't justify that line. So that's why I was a little bit interested in fading her, but this might be one of those times when you're too eager to fade somebody. So I'll probably hang back on this fight and wait for another opportunity to fade her a little bit down the road. But I will say there was a couple things that stood out in the Jazadovicius fight. Like Kay did take her down with a caught leg kick and get on top. She just got swept because there was no way she was going to hold down somebody of that size. And I think that cutting back to 115, that's at least interesting for me because number one, you have to make physical lifestyle changes to make the weight class. So I would assume she's going to be in better shape here. And then on top of that, you know, Machado, I think, is physical for 115, but I do think going from somebody like JJ, who's huge 5-inch reach and height advantage, to somebody who's more your size, I think that that's going to give her a fighting chance. But hey, on aggression, on the fact that she's got a ton of scar tissue around her eyes, she gets busted open there constantly. One of the worst cuts I've ever seen in women's MMA. In her second pro fight, I think it was. I forget the lady's name, but it was an absolutely brutal cut, TKO stoppage in the second round. And that's the kind of thing that makes me think, you know, maybe the fight doesn't go the distance is another sneaky angle. I know it's a women's MMA fight, but you mentioned this girl drops a lot of people. Kay Hansen could have a foot out the door. Her best chance to win, in my opinion, would be by submission. And on top of that, you know, the TKO cut stoppage is going to be live because this girl hits hard. Kay Hansen doesn't move her head very well. So for all those reasons, you know, I'm going to be continuing to monitor the prop market, but otherwise I'm probably going to pass on the ladies fight as well. But I wish you the best of luck on your side in that one. Next up, we've got another UFC newcomer here in Josh Fremd taking on Anthony Hernandez. And Anthony Hernandez has been in the middle of the middleweight shuffling chairs, if you will, where they tried to get about 50 different matchups made for this card and just couldn't get it together with Dricus du Plessis, with Kelvin Gastelum. Hernandez has been, you know, shuffled around the mix as a result. And now he draws Josh Fremd. I believe he's the LFA champion on the other side here. And also won another fight in FAC. The dude's looking for any opportunity he can get, but brutal KO loss to Gregory Rodriguez to send Rodriguez to the UFC. That was the first time I ever saw the guy fight live. So, you know, tough break there against RoboCop, you know, who does hit very, very hard. But this is a finisher, you know, it's a dangerous guy. I just think that Anthony Hernandez, you know, he's pretty slick. You know, he's an operator. He's a guy who's shown he'll take a little bit of a beating. and come back on you. You know, he kind of shows some interesting regional level wins as well. So I've been keeping an eye on this guy. I think that he's pretty talented, and I think that he could definitely win this fight. How do you feel about this one, James?
Yeah, I think Fluffy should probably take it, man. I think Fluffy is going to break him, honestly. But I don't like Fluffy as a betting prospect or whatever you want to call it, because he is a little bit vulnerable, you know? Like, I mean, I've seen him knocked out a couple of times. I've seen him knocked out real early as well. He seems like he's kind of like an on or off fighter. It's weird because one fight he'll look super tough, you know, take a beat in Jun Park, for example. You know, that was a great fight, man. That was such a scrappy fight. He ended up getting the choke, showed true heart. But then you go to the Kevin Holland fight, you know, he got touched once with an elbow and a knee, and he just, you know, basically quit, right? He just got put out. And then obviously there's a couple other fights. Beverly Hills Ninja there, but that, you know, he's very explosive. But it's just strange because I don't really trust someone like Fluffy Hernandez, but I kind of do think he's just going to break Josh Fremd here. I mean, looking at Josh Fremd, it's his UFC debut. He doesn't look like a great fighter. He's a good fighter. He's a meat and bones fighter. He's got decent striking. He pushes a solid pace. He'll try to push your back up against the octagon. He won't really stop throwing. He's a good fighter, you know. Like, I've got nothing too much to say about him, but I don't really know if he's UFC level. I think he's probably not UFC level. Look, maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I don't know. I think the fight doesn't go to decision is very, very likely, you know, and the bookies believe that as well. It's like minus 350, minus 400. The under 1.5 isn't that bad. I think both fighters are extremely vulnerable. Honestly, I think Fluffy can be finished by a lot of people. Although he is really tough, I do think he, you know, can also get finished a lot. And I'd also think Josh Fremd can be finished a lot. So, I mean, I'd like to maybe look at under 1.5. I'm not going to play it. I don't like under 1.5s in general. There is a fight I have got under 1.5 rounds, and you probably know what fight that is later on in the card I'll speak about. But under 1.5 rounds, I reserve them for a very, very specific type of matchup. This is not one of them, although I definitely do think it finishes within the first 2 minutes. You know, if they gave me a fight to finish within 2 rounds, I'd probably be all over that, to be honest. But yeah, I'm going to pick Fluffy. I think he drags Josh Fremd into deep waters and breaks him. I don't think Josh Fremd is UFC level, but nothing heavily interesting to me on the betting line, shall we say.
Makes perfect sense to me. And yeah, this is one of the ones that stood out as like an obvious pass fight. When you look at it, just because, you know, I don't like laying, you know, chalk behind somebody like Anthony Hernandez for the reasons that you mentioned. You know, he is a vulnerable guy. Betting into guys that have been finished in, you know, the opening salvo, never something that feels good because it could always happen again. And I do think that Josh Fremd is the kind of guy that's like his win condition in most fights, is to come out there and storm you early. So should be a good, fun fight. And yeah, I think that violence looked not bad. Under 1.5 rounds. You know, it's short chalk. Probably won't get there myself. But if maybe some money comes back on the over and it gets to even money, I would be interested in even money. That being said, we can move along. We've got a just complete shit show of a fight, if you don't mind my language, James. We've got Aleksei Oleinik. Again, this is sort of the shuffling of the deck chairs type of fight against Jared Vanderaa. And I have no idea what to make of this one, to be honest with you. I thought that the Ilir Latifi fight presented an interesting opportunity. I do think that this is probably somebody who's a little bit too big and physical for, you know, my man Aleksei Oleinik, who's absolutely ancient, but you know, Jared Vanderaa is not a good fighter. And for that reason, I don't want to trust him with my money. Pick'em seems sort of fair. I think either one of these guys could fight to type and lose in embarrassing fashion. It's also just hard to know what you're going to get from Aleksei Oleinik. This might be his retirement fight. I do think he's going to come out there, you know, swinging and trying. I thought he looked like he was in decent shape, you know, in the lead up for his last booking, but I don't know, man. I really have a hard time getting a clean read on this fight. And frankly, I don't want my money anywhere near it. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, the reason you're having a hard time getting a clean read is because this ain't a clean fight. This is a dirty ass fight, you know, and anything can happen in it. So we're not going to have this pinpoint read, like he's going to get taken down, he's going to get choked out. It's a strange fight, like you said. I actually like the Latifi and Oleinik fight a lot more. I had a unit on the fight goes to decision, plus 150. And I also played Oleinik decision at plus 700, small. You know, it was actually plus 900 on quite a few books. But this one, I don't have much to say about this fight. Look, on the one hand, I think Jared Vanderaa is a bad stylistic matchup for Aleksei Oleinik because Oleinik doesn't have good wrestling. And Jared Vanderaa has decent takedown defense, so he probably can keep it on the feet. And Jared Vanderaa is clearly a better striker than Aleksei Oleinik. But by the way, you could also get hurt by Aleksei Oleinik because Oleinik still has power. And as you said, Vanderaa isn't a good fighter. So, I mean, he still could get hurt. So I do think he probably keeps it on the feet and wins the fight. But let me tell you something now. If Oleinik just grabs on a leg and just falls to the ground like he does in a lot of his fights, and Vanderaa just falls on top of him, Vanderaa can easily get swept. Vanderaa can easily get completely mollywopped by Aleksei Oleinik on the mat. If Oleinik gets on top of Vanderaa, it could be brutal. You know, we've seen Vanderaa brutalized by Romanov and Spivak. And I actually think Aleksei Oleinik is a much better submission grappler, and he's much more tricky and crafty in terms of the ground fighting than Spivak and Romanov, right? So one takedown, the fight could be over. On the other hand, Vanderaa can easily stuff takedowns and win a 15-minute decision or just put Oleinik out. So extremely dodgy fight. Fight doesn't go to decision is maybe the only thing that I would look at, but now I'm just clutching at straws. I'm not betting on this fight. I'm passing on this fight. And I think everybody else should too, you know. But if you got a strong read on it, go ahead and, you know, risk your money. But not me and you won't be doing it.
Absolutely. Boa constrictor or pass, because that's how you represent martial arts culture. You bet on the boa constrictor or you pass. You do not bet on the bag of milk, Jared Vanderaa. You simply don't do it. All right. That being said, guys, we can move along to another fight at 155 pounds. This is an interesting one, and me and James have talked a little bit about this fight. And this is a fight where I feel, you know, compelled towards the plus money angle. And that being said, I haven't gotten involved. Would want a little bit of a better number. And number is everything in this game. I do think that, you know, Vinc Pichel, he's a guy that's shown a couple losses to this wrestling archetype in the past, right? And I know that last fight out, it was kind of weird because Clay Guida and Marco Madsen turned into this like staring contest, striking battle between, you know, two primary wrestlers. But what I think of when I look at the Marco Madsen footage is that this is a guy who's very, very good at picking people up and throwing them every which way but loose. Like when you look at his footage against early competitors, I know that they're not much, but the guy is freaky strong for the division. He was fighting at 170, lifting guys in the air, no problem, sending them over, ass over tea kettle. He choked a guy unconscious, like holding him up in the guillotine and just like threw him down like he was a sack of potatoes. Like the guy has very freaky strength. And I do think that he's got a ceiling. He's got a clear ceiling, right? He's a little bit older himself. I don't know that he's going to be able to go with the other young, fresh grapplers of the division. I think those guys are going to be able to give him a little bit of pace. And he does have a BJJ brown belt in Vinc Pichel, who has shown that when some guys get on top of him, he's not just going to, you know, lay out and give away the fight. You know, Jim Miller was a fight that he won against a guy who's a very solid grappler. He out-grappled Jim Miller for large portions of that fight. But I think that that was also a cardio factor. I have seen both of these guys slow down in previous fights. I do think that Vinc Pichel, he's got a great will, like work ethic, all these things. But the Rustam Khabilov fight, like he was just getting dominated by somebody who was physically stronger than him, and he had no answers. And I do think he's shown improvements. That was a long time ago. But then you see the Gregor Gillespie fight. Gregor was not as physically imposing in that fight and struggled more to get the takedowns, especially over time. But he was still able to break him with just the constant pressure of the takedowns. And I thought that eventually Vinc just like, you know, kind of conceded that fight, which is rare from a guy that tough. And Gregor's a different talent. But I also think it's like a right place, right time thing. I think that Mark is probably at the optimal level of his development. So I'm going to favor Mark here at a small clip. And I think he's probably going to win the fight, but I think it's very competitive. And I know that you feel the same way. How do you feel about this one, James?
Yeah, real competitive fight. I'm thinking if I was a bookmaker, I'd probably line it -110 apiece, honestly. I understand the Madsen love at a plus money because I line it -110 apiece. But me lining it -110 apiece means I think it's 50-50, means I can make a credible argument for both sides. So I'm not going to sit here and say, this guy's going to do this or this guy's going to do this. I'm just going to give you the whole archetype of the fight and why I think both fighters have a shot, right? Madsen is a strong, strong motherfucker. You know, like you said, the guy is extremely strong in them grappling positions. He gets his hand around your waist, you're going for a ride. You know, there's no doubt about it. Vinc Pichel is not going to stuff Marco Madsen's takedowns in this fight, right? By the way, he might stuff a lot as the fighter goes late, and we'll touch on that. But I think in the first round, if Vinc Pichel gets in his grappling scenarios, which Mark will eventually get him in some type of body lock position, clinch position, I think Madsen could dominate the first round. I think he could make it look easy. I think he could throw him around. But I don't trust his gas tank. You know, I do think that he finds it hard to go a hard 15 minutes at a high wrestling pace. And one thing I know about Vinc Pichel is he's going to make it a high wrestling pace. You know, you talk about the Kovalev fights and the Greg Gillespie fights. By the way, yeah, Kovalev quite a while ago, Gillespie complete other level than Marco Madsen, in my opinion. Gillespie is not on the level. Marco Madsen is not on the level as Gregor Gillespie. Even in those fights, Pichel made them guys work, man. You know, they didn't get 2 takedowns and the fight was over. Pichel got up constantly and made those fighters work. And by the way, Madsen, I don't think he has great top control. I think Gregor has better top control than Marco Madsen. Honestly, I don't think Madsen has that good top control. So I can't see a scenario where Madsen just is able to take him down and just stay on top of him for 15 minutes. You know, I cannot see that. I think it's almost impossible that Madsen just takes him down and stays on top of him for 15 minutes. I honestly think that that is not going to happen, right? So that leads me to believe that Pichel's going to get back up to his feet and he's going to make it interesting, right? I think there's a clear level disparity on the feet. I think he's a few tiers above Marco Madsen on the feet, even at 41 years old or 38 years old or whatever he is. You know, I think he's a few tiers above. So, you know, I think Marco Madsen's going to dominate in the grappling at times in this fight, but I think Pichel's going to make it real sticky for Mark at times in this fight. And I think that Mark's going to have bad body language because I think that he's going to realize like, oh shit, I can't hold this guy down. Pichel's going to be digging to the body. Pichel's going to be throwing funk kicks. Pichel's going to be pushing a heavy pace, heavy jabs. And I think that it's going to be a tale of 2 fights in multiple rounds. You know, I think that there's going to be the portion of the rounds where he's getting taken down, Pichel, but I think there's going to be another portion of the round where he's landing strikes. And it kind of just comes down to whoever did their thing later on in the round, you know, the end of round bias. If Mark gets the takedowns early, but Pichel gets back to his feet and fucks him up to the end of the round, he's going to win the round. If Pichel's able to evade the first couple of minutes, but then gets taken down towards the end of the round, he's going to lose the round. You know, -110 apiece, in my opinion. Either guy hits +150, I'm going to bet it. It's one of them fights for me. So I don't have a strong read on it. So if anyone does, I understand. Yeah, man, good luck if you do take the Madsen side. I understand it at a plus money. But for me, I'm just happy to watch the fight, sit back, no money on it. I'm not going to be stressing out if Madsen wins 2 rounds and then he's gassed as fuck in the 3rd round. I'm not going to lose a year on my life. And I'm also not going to be super frustrated, head in my hands, if Pichel keeps on getting taken down when he starts to do a decent bit of damage on the feet. So, you know, shout out to anyone betting on this fight, but I'm passing.
Absolutely. And I just want to hit on a couple of notes that you mentioned there. He's an international style wrestler. And I think so often that gets missed. Gregor Gillespie, he's an American folk style wrestler. The art of control. That's what we're trying to do. That's the goal. Whereas if you're looking at international styles, they're trying to slam people. They're trying to get points. They're trying to get offense off. And they're also defensively sound. So you look at somebody like Marco Madsen, he's not going to get taken down easily either. Though I have seen him give up some takedowns and scramble back up to his feet quickly. I think that what's impressive about him is that offense. I think if he finishes in the first round, that's like one of the ways he wins this fight. I think he could just overwhelm Pichel by like coming out like a bat out of hell. Sometimes Pichel like works his way into a fight, starts a little bit slow and a little bit lackadaisical, I feel. Whereas I've seen Madsen have both approaches. I've seen him come out a little bit more measured. I've seen him come out like a bat out of hell. And then like the Danilo Belluardo fight, obviously that's a lower level of resistance, but that's a different attitude. That's a different like way of fighting. He was in his home country and he just stormed the dude and he was not going to take no for an answer. I think if he does that, he might be able to get Pichel out of there. I think if not, he's going to make it a much harder fight on himself if he tries to fight this guy over 15 minutes, because Vinc Pichel's hard as shit to beat for the 15 minutes. Ask Jim Miller, who had a lot of good moments, but just couldn't keep it together for the full 15, especially when cardio became a concern. So that's going to be the interesting challenge here. Another well-made fight by the UFC. But with that being said, we can absolutely, James.
Yeah, sorry, bro. We have to give a quick shout out to the man who is the Vinc Pichel whisperer, Paul Shaughnessy of the podcast, Dog or Pass podcast with Cody Safdie, right? Because he has gone something like 8 fights in a row of Vinc Pichel fights, and he's predicted them correctly each time. So, I'm over here saying it's -110 apiece. Madsen could win. Pichel could win. Liam's saying, he favors Madsen, but he's still not 100% sure whether he's going to take the shot. Don't listen to us. Go and listen to the Dog or Pass podcast. Listen to the man who's got the last 8 Vinc Pichel fights right, because obviously he knows something. And sorry, Paul, to put all this pressure on you, but you brought it on yourself by getting every single one of Vince's fights right. So maybe listen to him and not us on this one.
Absolutely. And I will say, Paul Shaughnessy, friend of the show. So you guys know, these are the kind of great guests I bring, not just the man James, but also the Vinc Pichel whisperer. These are the kind of people that I bring on my show. So make sure, if you haven't already, you go ahead and like this video. You go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. Who else is coming at you this late on a Sunday? Who else is bringing on the man Lucrative on a Sunday, breaking him out? Thank you so much, my friend, for joining us. Always appreciated. And with that said, we've got another great fight here between Mickey Gall and Mike Mallott. And Mike Mallott cashed me a nice ticket on the Contender Series. Thought that was a very winnable matchup. Plus, I had seen the fact that, he beat my man Solomon Renfro, another very solid local fighter. Unfortunately, falling on a little bit of hard times. I'm sure he's going to get that back on the tracks. But either way, that was a fight where Mike Mallott wasn't necessarily supposed to win. This is a former featherweight, guy who used to fight at 145. Now he's fighting at a much more natural weight class for him at 170 pounds. But you also have to imagine he's not going to be the world's biggest 170 pounder. So they got another guy who's not the world's biggest 170 pounder, but certainly growing into his frame, does have a large frame in Mickey Gall. And Mickey Gall, kind of a weird run through the UFC. Anybody who's shown a recent loss to Diego Sanchez inside the distance is somebody you're going to have to ask some serious questions about. And it's also in part due to his cardio, man. He just has had cardio drop-offs throughout his UFC run. And I think that was a struggle in the Morono fight as well. The guy just has a hard time putting together a solid 15 minutes. But with that being said, the Jordan Williams fight I thought was his best look ever in the UFC. He came out there, he looked composed, his striking looked a little bit better, and then he had good finishing instincts, which he has shown before. If he hurts somebody, if he's able to take their back, the guy's a dangerous submission artist. And I think that's going to be his best path to victory here. Excuse me. He's going to need to get this fight to the ground. He's going to need to try and take out Mike Mallott. Mike has been working on his grappling game. Obviously, he's been out there doing grappling matches. You see some Tapology results. I've watched a couple of his grappling matches. The guy's no slouch, but I don't think he's like the world's greatest grappler either. Mickey Gall, he's not the world's greatest grappler, but he does have very high-level positions. And this is a guy like Mike Mallott who's got a high-level position. That guillotine is money. And I'm a guy who likes guillotines, though. I fancy the way he goes for him. He's dangerous, right? He puts your head in the hole and doesn't let it back out. That's a good way to finish people. If you're going to go for guillotines, you got to have a guy who's going to stick it. And the way I like the way he grips it. He normally reaches for that prayer grip. So the hand's already through. You're not getting it back. Then he starts shoving it through. So he's a brutal grappler in his own right. If he hurts Mickey Gall here, he could submit him as well. This is a fight where I think violence is very possible. Mike Mallott comes out there and he likes to throw down. His defense is something that I would say is a little bit void at times. He's very offensively potent, but he's willing to get in these exchanges and these brawls at times that he's been able to come out ahead, but he also gets hurt. He puts himself in danger. Me and Hakeem beat the shit out of him back in the day. So it's like a guy who I think could definitely win fights in the UFC, fun fighter, but I also think there's a reason that he shows such little amount of experience in the pro cage. Took a bit of time away from the game, kind of a weird story. Also some family in professional sports. So I think he comes from good stock. I think he could definitely win some UFC fights. This is one of them. But I don't think he's going to have a very high ceiling overall in the division, kind of like Mickey Gall. So interesting matchmaking. I do think it's kind of surprising to see him as this big a favorite, though. How do you feel, James?
Yeah, well, weird fight. Another weird fight. I mean, Mike Mallott, right? He has like less than 3 minutes fight time in the last six years or something like that. I mean, I can't get a read on the fella. You can't get a read on the fella. Nobody can get a read on him because he's got 3 minutes fight time in the last 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is, right? So I said to myself, why is Mike Mallott minus 180, 190? I have no idea. Nobody knows how good he is. We can't really tell. We've seen him go to a draw with a 5-4 fighter. This is a long time ago, of course. We've seen him get completely destroyed by Hakeem, right? We've seen him get his face beat off by Solomon Renfro, and then he got the choke. Shout out to him. Very tough to do that. He knocked him down actually first, and then he got the choke. But
stunned him.
He doesn't look like this unbelievable fighter, right? He looks decent. He looks all right. And then he hasn't fought more than 3 minutes over 3 fights in 5 years. So I have no idea how he's minus 180 just based on what we have. Now, he might be minus 180 skill for skill, and he might prove that on the weekend. But nobody can say that, right? So I said to myself, nobody can say that with the data we have, I should say. Now, I said to myself, if Mickey Gall goes plus 170, I am playing it out of principle. I have no idea if he's going to win the fight. I have no idea who I even favor in this fight. There's no 65% Mickey Gall wins, 24% he wins by submission. None of this crazy, percentage lark that people like to post out on Twitter. All I know is that from the data points we have, there's no way you can make this guy a minus 200 favorite. He could go out there and prove he is minus 200, but from what we have seen now, we cannot do it, in my opinion. So I bet Mickey Gall at plus 170, right? And I'm gonna make that bet 100 times out of 100 when it's so much. There's so much variance playing into this fight because of the lack of data we have on Mike Mallott. The variance is extremely high. We have no idea what he's going to look like after 15 minutes, throughout a whole 50-minute performance in a fight where he hasn't gone to decision in 7-8 years or whatever it is. So, I mean, I'm playing into the variance. Some people don't like to do it that way, but in my opinion, one of the best ways to make money on MMA is play into the variance at a big plus number. And at plus 170, I had to take the shot. I think money must start coming in on Mickey Gall now. I don't see him get much better than plus 170, but if he does, I might even add to him. So yeah, I'm playing into the variance here. Mickey Gall, let's go.
I kind of agree with you, and it's a numbers game. So when I saw Mike Mallott at minus 145 or whatever it was, I think early on, I was like, interesting enough. Like Mickey Gall, maybe that's an interesting fade in the UFC. But once you're getting to minus, we're over 65% indication on somebody that, like you mentioned, has 6 minutes of fight time or 3 minutes of fight time in 6 years. It's just, you're just making a guess, and God bless, a lot of people do that in sports betting, but if you're trying to make money long-term, you look for inefficiencies. And this is somebody who got a recent knockout, shows a couple good wins. That's something that the market loves. They love to bet into that. I think that that's showing in the movement here. So yeah, James, I'll probably be part of that buyback with you on the other side, even though if you were to give me this fight at evens, yeah, I would probably take Mike Mallott based on everything I've seen from the two guys. But, thinking that he can go 15 minutes because Mickey Gall can't, that's just a guess. It's not backed up in data. So I love the angle, James, and it's something I'll be considering myself. So with that being said, guys, we can move along to another fight here. And this is going to be one that I don't come down with the strongest read on. I've gotten several fights wrong on the Raquel Pennington side to this point in my life. So I don't love, donating money to her cause. But with that being said, I have faded Aspen Ladd successfully with Norma Dumont in her last outing. I think I got a pretty decent, plus 145 or something number on Norma Dumont. Not a bad shout there, but I think that this is a much different fight as well, because Norma, I do think, has a little bit crisper boxing, a little bit more reliable power. Raquel doesn't have bad boxing game, but she's more insistent on the dirty boxing, the clinch fight, pushing you into the cage. And a lot of her fights turn out to be those 29, 28, greaser, anybody could get it, split decision type of fights. And for that reason, I think that this is an interesting one. You got a big age gap here for a women's MMA fight, about 6 years favoring Aspen Ladd. She's the younger fighter here. Just a hard fight for me to get a convincing read on, though. I think Aspen Ladd at her best is a punishing top player. I think she's going to struggle to get on top in this fight. But I do think that she's a strong girl and she's younger. She's going to be competitive in those clinch scenarios. But I do think she'll probably just get vet savvied here and lose a close decision. So I understand where the market is at. I understand where the line is, but it's just it's not a fight that I feel very confident in betting one way or the other. It did open up much closer than it's at now. So I think that early numbers on Raquel Pennington got eaten up at the minus 150, minus 160 prices. And yeah, I just wouldn't be itching to get involved now that we're at, again, a 65% indication in a fight I expect goes to decision more often than not. And if I had to rate somebody with higher finishing equity, I would actually probably put it on the Aspen Ladd side. So for me, that would be enough to stay off the favorite. How about you, James?
Yeah, I echo a lot of your thoughts here, man. It's not a fight I really want to get involved at. It's not a fight I really have too much of a great read on. As you said, Pennington, she likes to get in that clinch, or even if she doesn't, I don't know if she likes to get into it, but, her game, her style, she usually ends up getting into it. The dirty boxing, the clinch, the close range boxing. She isn't really good at evading, staying on the outside and boxing your face off, which is a good archetype to beat someone like Aspen Ladd, right? Because we saw Norma Dumont do it, very easily last time out. If it does get into that close quarters range, I think Aspen Ladd is a little bit more live in that fight. I do think that maybe the fight hits the ground. Maybe she could get a takedown if it's clinched for 15 minutes, like it was in that Pani Khamzat fight. There's going to be ample opportunity for Aspen Ladd to get some sort of takedown. If she does get top time, she's dangerous on top, man, against any girl in the division, in my opinion. So I do think that if she gets on top of Rocky, it could be pretty, it could be trouble for Rocky, So I wouldn't really want to back Rocky at minus 200. If anything, I'd be looking more on the Aspen Ladd side. I'm hoping that Rocky kind of gets thrown into all these parlays and we can get Aspen at like a plus 200 or something, which would be pretty interesting for me. But yeah, as you said, no big read on it. And yeah, I'm staying away personally.
Yeah, I think Dan makes a great point here, which is let's see Ladd on the scales. And I do believe this is going to be a return to 135 after about at 145. So that's something to note here. I think that, for Aspen Ladd, the weight cutting has been a factor, I thought that knockout loss to Germaine Durandamy was like almost directly correlated. I know that Germaine Durandamy can hurt girls on the feet, but she's had, a lot of opportunities to do so and not hurt girls instantly. And she just sent Aspen Ladd flying. And I thought that was potentially an early stoppage, but either way, this is the kind of fight where I don't expect Raquel Pennington's going to do that. So Aspen will have her opportunities. And we did see in the Yana Kunitskaya fight, arguably she's losing minutes. Her coach gets on her, goes out there and storms back in round 3. So she's not a girl that you could easily count out. If she is losing, that first round, maybe you get an even better live number as well. That's something that I will be considering for this fight. But no strong read at this point, and I will be waiting for the weigh-ins to see how that line progresses. That being said, we can move on to a fight here at 265 pounds. And, when you're breaking down these heavyweight fights, sometimes you try and think about them a little bit differently. You know, these fights do end inside the distance a little more frequently. Any wrong move at heavyweight could lead to somebody getting knocked out, and that's part of the intrigue. That's part of the appeal. But also, I think that heavyweight attracts some of these guys that are, you know, unidimensional. They are really good at one thing. Jairzinho Rozenstruik is a death touch fighter. You know, if you look at his skill set, you wouldn't be like, oh, well, he's got a really potent jab, and it's all about the combinations. No, mostly what he does is he hits somebody and they get badly hurt, or their face looks different, or they fall over, or everything goes wrong and they're bleeding. It's like he just hits very hard. He's got a good left hook. He's not like an inept fighter. He has some skills. He will try and wall walk. He will try and do certain things. He gets taken down all the time. I thought he showed a better product against Curtis Blades. You know, he offered some tools that would dissuade you from wrestling. He jumped up the middle with the knee, for example, tried to give him a couple different looks and showed a little bit more willingness to be active. But he doesn't do anything. He does not be very active. So when I look at a guy like Jairzinho fighting a guy like Marcin, I say the decision is Marcin's to be had. But I don't think Marcin is going to make it 15 minutes with a guy like Jairzinho. He hits too hard. Marcin has had problems in the past with power punchers, with guys that hit really hard. You know, when you look at how other guys have dealt with Greg Hardy, correspondingly, they took the blueprint and realized that this guy can't, hang underneath you. But on top of that, you know, Sergey Spivak just took him down instantly, got him out of there. Marcin Tybura was getting boxed up. He was getting outclassed a little bit on the feet at points by Greg Hardy, and I think that that's a concern. I think that Jairzinho is fast. You know, he's kind of like a deceptively fast guy, and he will wait, draw you back, do nothing, do a little bit of this, lull you to sleep, and just like Augusto Sakai, he'll catch you in a moment of opportunity. Somebody that's going to throw volume gives an opportunity to a guy like Jairzinho, and he's shown that even over 25 minutes, when the guy's completely exhausted, he can hit you with 10 seconds left, and your face is gone, and the fight's over. And that fight against Alistair Overeem changed the way I think about fighting. It's like, this guy, it's very hard to bet against this guy inside the distance. It's like his durability is off the charts. Only Ngannou was able to get him out of there. The guy's taking clean blows from everybody else and laughed him off like it's nothing. You know, took a complete beating through some of these fights. And I think that shows his durability's there, his power's there. That's the more dangerous heavyweight, in my opinion, over 15 minutes. So I'm going to back Jairzinho inside the distance here. And I think he's probably going to knock out Marcin Tybura. Also, when you look at how Aspinall treated my man Volkov, you would have never thought that was possible based on Volkov stuffing 16 takedowns and making Marcin look like he had nothing to offer in that realm. So just a complete level difference in speed, athleticism, all those things. And I think in this fight, maybe they're on a little bit closer of a plane there, but the power is ultimately going to favor Jairzinho. So give me Jairzinho here. How about you, James?
Yeah, Aspinall's from England. You must have not remembered. Aspinall's from England. Of course he dealt like him. Of course he dealt him like that. But yeah, man, look, this fight is a strange fight. I don't have a strong read on it because I don't have a strong read on any Jairzinho Rozenstruik fight. You know, the guy doesn't throw punches. He's very hard to know whether he's going to knock his opponent out or just get beat over 15 minutes. You know, I mean, if that Alistair Overeem fight was over 15 minutes, he would have lost, you know, and there would be no talk of him carrying his power late. Because other than that, all his knockouts are in the first round. I think Jairzinho probably touches him. Marcin Tybura gets hurt in every single fight. Every single fight, Tybura manages to get hurt. You know, one thing I like to bet on in MMA, patterns. You know, something I like to bet on in MMA even more, patterns that happen in every single fight. Marcin Tybura gets hurt in almost every single fight he's ever fought in his entire career in the UFC. So Jairzinho's a decent fighter. He probably is going to hurt him here. The thing about Jairzinho is like, he's not like Greg Hardy or he's not like Walt Harris. If he hurts you, you're out. You know, it's not like you're going to recover from that. So I do think that if Marcin Tybura gets hurt in this fight, like he does in every fight, is probably going to get hurt for the last time in that fight. It's probably going to be a knockout blow. So yeah, I am gonna go with the consensus opinion. This is what everybody believes, that Jairzinho gets the knockout. I want to go with Tybura because honestly, the path is there for him. You know, the takedowns are there for him. The path to victory with the volume and mainly the takedowns, not really the volume. It's there for him. You know, it's definitely there for him. But I can't do it because he gets hurt in every single fight. So I'll go with Rozenstruik via KO reluctantly. And I highly doubt I'll be playing it unless I have a last minute addition because I've watched some more tape or something like that. But yeah, pure pick. I'll go with Rozenstruik KO.
I totally understand that because I'm going to be doing the same, but I'm going to be putting definitely some stake behind that. So probably just to win a unit, not going crazy there, but I do like the number. I think that, you know, the guy is minus 150 on the money line. He's probably not going to win a decision, and he's plus 125 to win inside the distance. For me, that's an easier way to play him. I'm going to play him that way. I don't see any KO numbers above plus 125, so that's the way I chose to target it here, and I'm comfortable with that exposure, limiting my exposure here, but I still think that very winnable opportunity for Jairzinho Rozenstruik, who is the more bankable, marketable fighter as well. As far as I'm concerned, you look at the placement on cards. The guy's been in main events where Marcin Tybura, you know, he's normally just a filler fight on cards. And I think that in this spot, they're trying to feed him out because he was on a win streak. He lost to Volkov. Volkov's on the outs now too. That's the way I'm looking at that fight. But now we move on to something much more compelling. We've got a good fighting Irishman going to be taking on Darian Weeks here. Ian Gary makes his return after securing a knockout, but not without some shots landing on the other side as well in his last bout. So I think that the Ian Gary hype is evident. You know, the line is starting to flow out in his direction and get wider and wider. There's a play that I have already been targeting. I have not bet it yet, but I have been waiting for it to open a little bit more across the market to see what the best available number will end up being. And right now I'm seeing Gary to win by sub can be had as high as plus 850. I do think that is an interesting look in this fight. And that's something I'm going to be considering. I did play it in his last fight, I believe, at a slightly worse number, and he ended up knocking the guy out. But I think that he should be able to potentially secure a club and sub. The guy's shown he has incredible power, or just a clean submission in this fight. How do you feel about this one, James?
Yeah, I jumped on Gary early. He was minus 230, and I knew the line would go crazy. And not even that I knew the line would go crazy, because I don't bet on stuff like that just because I know the line's going to blow up, unless I know for a fact I can hedge, you know. But I saw him at minus 230. I did the tape. I was like, yeah, this guy, he's got Darian Weeks covered everywhere, in my opinion. So I bet on Ian Gary at minus 230. It's my biggest bet on the card. 5 units there. Obviously, completely smashed the line. So, you know, sometimes that can be a curse line value, closing line curse, whatever you want to call it, CLV. But, you know, more often than not, I think when you beat the line by that much, usually it's for a good reason, right? So hopefully he's going to go out there and mollywop him. I think that he can win anyway. I think he can win by knockout. I'm not seeing a submission as much as you. But yeah, I think the knockout comes. Or I definitely could see a 15-minute performance from Ian Gary as well. You know, he's got good cardio. I've seen it once before. And, you know, he went 5 rounds with Jack Grant, who's a veteran of the UK MMA scene. And he was in some quote-unquote precarious positions. Jack Grant never gave up in that fight. So I do think that Gary has pretty good cardio. I do think that he will eventually land the KO shot, though. I just don't really see many paths to victory for Darian Weeks, you know. Look, maybe Weeks can come out here and wrestle him, because Weeks did start as a wrestler. He did get multiple takedowns on Brian Barberena. And although he has some knockouts on his regional scene record, he will tell you himself that he is actually a wrestler first. So I do think we'll see him go back to his wrestling roots in this fight. But I'm happy with what I've seen with Ian Gary's takedown defense thus far. And I just think Gary's the much longer fighter, the much cleaner fighter. He's obviously training with the guys over there. Where's he training? With Vicente Luque and all of them fighters now.
That's Sanford?
Yeah, is that Sanford MMA now? He's moved out there. He's moved his house. You know, he's completely moved country. So, you know, he's getting in solid work there. I do think we'll see improvements from him. He's still only young. He's got a good mind for the game. I don't think he's going to be champion. I don't think he has, that. I don't think he's ever going to be that good. A lot of people are touting him as the new Conor McGregor. I think that's pretty funny, to be honest. But, he's a good fighter, and I think he's going to clearly win this fight. And I've got a bet on him.
Very nice. And I was thinking about like having the stake between the sub and the fight ends inside, or excuse me, Gary inside the distance. So that was what I was sort of thinking about. I do think that, he's got a good path to finishing this fight for all the reasons that you mentioned. But what I try and do is look for guys that have, finishing potential in another realm, and look for that kind of value when I felt like last time, he was more likely to get a knockout, but you're getting virtually the same price on the inside the distance as you are on the KO. So for me, inside the distance is the clear play there. And then if he subs him, bonus. It's like, of course, that's always live. We saw freaking Adolfo Vieira get submitted by Anthony Fluffy Hernandez to call back to earlier in the card. So anybody can get submitted by anybody else in an MMA fight. And I do think that when you hurt somebody, if they're a tough guy and they're trying to get back into it, why unload with punches? Take that back, choke him out. There's never been a tough guy who was asleep. I'll tell you that. So that's what I like. I like people who go for chokes, and he has shown a propensity to do that, both in the amateurs and the pros. It's not his normal path, which is why you're getting the discount, in my opinion. So for a guy who I think should be able to cover him in the grappling, I'm a little bit interested in that sub poke. But it will be a poke. I will focus my energy on Ian Gary winning the fight there, probably inside the distance as my major play. So with that being said, I believe we're on to the main card here. We have next up, kicking off the main card, speaking of jiu-jitsu, Mackenzie Dern, one of the greatest women's jiu-jitsu practitioners to ever cross over into the UFC, to ever compete in the gi in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Also taking on Tecia Torres, somebody who's been around for a very long time in the UFC. That first season of The Ultimate Fighter, I remember I watched it all unfold live. And so Tecia has been a part of my MMA fandom for some time now. And I do think that she's shown some improvements over time. Obviously, she's had fights that she's lost in the UFC. She went on a big losing streak. But you look at the quality of competition: Jessica Andrade, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Weili Zhang, Marina Rodriguez. So basically, she was shown the hard way. All right, you're not elite right now. And I think that right now she's being used as a bit of a measuring stick for up-and-comers, right? You look, obviously the Angela Hill fight is a little bit more of that veteran taking a step forward, but Sam Hughes, 5-1 as a professional, just like way less opposite, or like just way less quality of opponent. Brianna Fortino, Van Buren, I think was her name at the time, but again, just not a fighter who I think is future top 15 in the UFC. So I look at this fight as kind of shit or get off the pot a little bit for Mackenzie Dern. Obviously, they're still trying to develop her as a prospect, but she's been, kind of false started a few times now as a UFC prospect. The Nina Nunes fight seems a little bit opportunistic in hindsight. I thought that one takedown in the fight would be over. That was the narrative. And I believed it myself in the Marina Rodriguez fight, proved it wasn't the case. And Marina, had very questionable grappling footage in some previous fights where the likes of Cynthia Calvillo had absolutely dominated her and almost gotten 10-8 rounds and stuff on the ground. So I think sometimes you get these grapplers that don't mix in the damage on the ground as well as I'd like to see from somebody like Mackenzie. She's doing jiu-jitsu on the ground. She's not doing MMA on the ground yet. And for me, that's a problem. Until I see that change, I'm a little bit sketched out to play her because I thought that she's had some winnable fights where she's cost me money now. So yeah, I'm a little bit bitter with Mackenzie Dern, but I am a fan overall. James, how do you feel about her chances to beat the Tiny Tornado this weekend?
It's a close fight. Mackenzie Dern is one of the best grapplers in the UFC, men or women. We don't even have to mention the gender. But you're right, man. She plays submission a bit too much. She's always looking for the submission. And you're a grappler, bro. Like if the fighter's purely hunting a submission, you can just be super defensive and it's very hard for you to get submitted. We look at Gunnar Nelson versus Takashi Sato last time out. 3 10-8 rounds maybe, right? But the guy was so defensive that Gunnar just couldn't get submission off. So he did what he should have done and just, landed heavy strikes. And he, there was definitely some shouts for 10-8s in there. And I think he got a couple of 10-8s on a few scorecards. So, that's something to note there, that the Gunnar Nelson was a little bit smarter than Mackenzie Dern, because when Mackenzie Dern took down Marina Rodriguez, the 10-8 was there. She took her down with 4 minutes left in that second round, and Marina Rodriguez did not get up till the referee broke them up and said, get up because the round's over. So she got completely dominated, right? But she didn't get submitted. So shout out to Marina for not getting submitted. But she got utterly dominated in that in the grappling realm, right? But Mackenzie Dern, she fucked up, because if she would have went ground and pound like she did in the last 30 seconds, it could have been a lot more. There could have been a lot more of opportunities opened up on the ground, in my opinion, So maybe she learns from that. Maybe here, if she gets Torres down, if she can't get the sub straight away, which she honestly probably can, if she can't get a sub straight away, she can do the ground and pound, right? So it's a hard one. I actually think Torres is going to destroy her on the feet. It's not close. She's much more active. She's a lot better striker on the feet. But Torres throws a lot of strikes, right? Mackenzie Dern doesn't have good wrestling, but she throws a lot of kicks, Tecia Torres, right? So it isn't out of the realm of possibility that Mackenzie Dern catches one of the 100 kicks that Tecia Torres likes to throw. I mean, she's called Tiny Tornado. She throws tornado kicks, for fuck's sake. That's not why she's called it, but she does throw tornado kicks. She'll throw spinning back kicks. She'll throw rolling thunders. She's very aggressive with these kicks. Against a grappler, you don't want to do that, right? Because Mackenzie Dern catches one, takes her down, the round's over or the fight's over. So I think Tecia Torres is going to win the fight to conclude my breakdown. I think Tecia Torres is going to win. I think if you play Tecia Torres, instead of playing her at -110, you play her at +150 for your decision. Extremely unlikely she's going to finish someone like Mackenzie Dern, who's one of the toughest women fighters in that division. So I've played it. Tecia Torres via decision, +150. I like that play, but I'm fully aware that because she throws so many kicks, if she does it in this fight, which she might not do, she might be smart and she sticks to the boxing a lot more than, throwing a lot more than her other fights. But I'm fully aware that if she gets taken down, the fight could be over or the round's definitely going to be over. So, I've played the decision line on Torres because I think that's the most likely path to victory. And at +150, I like it. I think she's a better fighter.
I couldn't agree with you more, James. And really, you hit the nail on the head. You said it. She's a better fighter. And I think Mackenzie Dern is highly talented. I think she's highly skilled. I think she could win this fight because fights are like that. It doesn't matter. The better fighter doesn't always win the fight. But when you look at who should win the fight, the better fighter should win the fight more often than not. And in this case, I think that Dern sub-1, that's a live outcome. Especially fresh, especially when they're not sweaty. She's an operator, dude. She gets on the ground. She's like that, one move to the other. And I used to love this expression, step 1, step 2, step 3, and it's over. That's what jiu-jitsu is at its best. There's no going backwards. We're moving from one thing to the next. That's what she does. But I also think it's just going to be tough when you start introducing these threats of strikes, man. And we see it happen in a lot of fights. Gary Tonin, Tan Lee, if you guys didn't check that out, Gary's one of these guys I respect immensely. I try and model my style after him in a lot of ways. Not as many leg locks because that's not what I do. But either way, the guy enters in on this leg lock. It looks beautiful. It looks promising. Loses the angle, he's fucked. He's getting beat up. He's getting slammed with shots in the head. And that's the problem is when you just try and do jiu-jitsu for jiu-jitsu's sake, you find yourself in bad fighting positions, like underneath somebody or getting slammed on the head or getting punched when you're not looking. All those kind of things make, for me, a tough ask, a tough out. Plus, you're seeing that Tecia Torres has flipped to plus money on several books. I think that's interesting. So, yeah, I think that this is a compelling fight. I understand the case for both ladies. I think that the prop market is the way to go on the Mackenzie Dern side. Another fighter where I rate her chances of winning a decision as far less than her chances of winning the fight outright. So for that reason, I would be looking to target her inside the distance at the same line as her submission line now. I think plus 250 is the best available on either one of those. I think if you have 5 dimes, maybe you can get plus 300 on the Dern sub. That would be the other way to look to target her. But for me, this will be a dog or pass situation. So for that reason, I'm looking towards the Tecia Torres side, or I will pass on this fight because it does always pain me to go against the jiu-jitsu legends. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And part of the skill in this game is having no friends. I'll turn on a fighter right after they cash me a ticket 1 week. Derek Brunson to win by sub versus Darren Till. Biggest win of my life until Jared Cannonier money line, because we got to just switch sides whenever is appropriate. But with that being said, guys, we can move along to a fight that me and James have been kicking back and forth all week. Fired up about this one. Who isn't? Everybody's excited about this guy, Khamzat Chimaev, and some people are excited to fade him. They think he's a fraud. They think he's fake. They think it's not real. They think it's all a bunch of hype. I get that perspective. Then there's people like me, and they're sitting on the other side going, guys, did you watch the footage? This guy is fucking scary, and I don't know who's going to beat him. And when I look at this guy's skills, I see a guy who is big for the division. I see a guy who's very strong and physical. I see a guy who's got power in his hands that's very scary, right? A lot of people were ready to fade my man Gerald Mearshart. He's got no chin. He can't take a punch. No, he came back 3 months after getting knocked out by Ian Heinisch, and he got cleaned up in one shot by this guy Khamzat Chimaev. And you'd say, hey, maybe that's just an outlier performance. Maybe, you know, this guy just hit Gerald Mearshart, and it's because he got hit a couple months ago, and that's the reason why his chin failed him. No, you go back and look at the regional footage. This guy's doing this to undefeated fighters, knocking them out brutally. One of the most brutal knockouts you'll ever see against Aleksei. And this is one that me and James talked about. It's a fight that just changes the way you look at somebody. Aleskeirov's out there stuffing takedowns. Classic Dagestani guy, moving around beautifully, throwing some good shots. I've heard people say this week, I haven't even seen Khamzat Chimaev take a punch. Go watch more footage. I saw him take punches. He took a couple clean jabs there. He took a couple clean straights. And what he was doing was moving forward, pursuing takedowns, and when he couldn't get them, firing away with his own shots. And when this guy lands on people's chin, they detonate. He is dropping people with hard shots. When he gets on top, he's not throwing willy-nilly ground and pound. It's intentional. It's purposeful. And it's hard, and he's hurting people with the shots. He's messing up their face. He's opening them up for subs. So he doesn't do the Mackenzie Dern, try and put you through 3 positions to get you to the ultimate sub. No, it's I'm going to beat you into submission, and then you're going to give me your neck, or you're going to give me whatever, or you're just going to barrel up because I'm a problem. So I look at Gilbert Burns. I have nothing but respect for Gilbert Burns. The guy is a grappling legend. The guy is, frankly, an innovator. He's got great skills. He moves well in all positions. But he did his best work, I would argue, at 155 pounds, at 160 pounds, at 165 pounds. This is a different kind of athlete, a different kind of physicality, in my opinion. When you look at somebody like Gilbert Burns, Khamzat Chimaev's not making 155. Period. It's not happening. 85, he's like Jack at them grapple he's not the most middleweight in the world, but he's quite a physical middleweight. He's got wrestling, grappling for days. He's a strong guy. He's got a big body, big core, looks physical at home, right? I think they wrestled in Sweden, so neither guy is like taking a flight or whatever. And he dogged him. He was much physically stronger than a guy who's a proficient grappler at 185. And so I look at that and I say, this guy, Khamzat Chimaev, I've seen guys try and take him down. I've seen guys try and push that grappling back on him. And he was able to scramble. He was able to move. He was able to punish their attempts by hitting them with hard shots, punches, elbows. He makes it a suffering for as long as the fight lasts. And he fights at an incredibly high pace, right? You look at some of these guys and they got to turn themselves on. They got to get into the fight. Khamzat Chimaev starts every fight on 100. And he starts the fights. He's yelling. He's talking. He's looking around. The guy is one of the more settled fighters you're ever going to see before a fight. And he tells you what he's going to do. He runs across the octagon and does it. And then he picks you back up. He's a sportsman about it. Like, it's kind of insane. I think that he's a very, very talented prospect, and I'm excited to see him challenge for the title in the future. I think that he is going to do that, and I think he's going to win the fight this weekend. So I'm going to kick it to you with that prelude. I like Khamzat Chimaev, and if you give me a significant plus money tag, plus 150 or better, I'm making it a very large wager against Kamaru Usman. I'll say that right now.
So the best way I can talk about this matchup is by telling you a bet I have. And it's not on this matchup, right? It's a future bet. Who will be the welterweight champion at the end of 2022? And I have the most amount of money that my bookie let me place on Khamzat Chimaev at plus 400. They then changed that after I bet it. They changed the line because I was betting it to like plus 250 or plus 200. And I put even more on, right? So that tells you what I think about Khamzat Chimaev, right? I think he's the real deal. I think he's going to knock out Gilbert Burns. I think he even could submit him if it happens. I think he's going to finish Gilbert Burns in round 1 or round 2. Yeah, man. I mean, I don't want to... I feel like this fight is going to be the most talked about fight of the week, right? Because he's such an enigma. I don't want to go too much in depth on it. I think Chimaev's just much bigger than him. He's much stronger than him, you know. I just think that Khamzat is going to be able to dictate where this fight goes. The Ali Iskarov fight is the best fight to watch of Khamzat Chimaev, right? To this day, it's the most info we have on Khamzat Chimaev. His takedowns got stuffed. You're probably listening to me now like, what? Someone stopped Khamzat Chimaev's takedowns? Yes. Khamzat Chimaev went very hard for them takedowns against Ali Iskarov, who, by the way, is the best fighter he's ever fought. Yes, he's better than the Leech. He's better than Gerald Meerschaert, in my opinion. I think Aleksei is a legit fighter. He wasn't meant to win that fight, by the way. That was a Aleksei fight that he was meant to win. Aleksei, he stuffed Khamzat's takedowns. Khamzat couldn't take him down. People want to say, oh, but what about if he can't take Gilbert down? Well, we already saw what happened if he can't take someone down. He lands a huge uppercut and they go sleeping and their gum shield goes halfway across the octagon. And the fight is called, right? Gilbert Burns doesn't have a good chin. The guy was dropped by a jab multiple times against Marty Usman. He's been knocked out at 155 against Dan Hooker. He doesn't have a great chin. I think Khamzat hits extremely hard. We've seen him do it to Iskarov and Gerald Meerschaert. Extremely brutal knockouts. I've seen him drop multiple other people on the regional scene. I think he's going to knock out Gilbert Burns. I think he's going to cover his price tag. I think he's going to prove he is who he is. But if you want to fade him because we haven't seen him fight against this fighter, then by all means do it. I understand that long-term, this is a good bet, is to fade someone with the hype of Chimaev at minus 500, plus 500. I understand that long-term, that is a good spot to fade, you know, people with in general. But you know what's a better long-term spot? Is to take every fight as they come and don't just blind fade someone because they're plus 500, right? Or minus 500. I think personally that he will cover the price tag. I think he's the real deal. And yeah, I think he gets the knockout. And I will be on the under 1.5. Plus money. At plus money. That's a jewel. That's a jewel in this fight, right? The under 1.5 is plus money. And Khamzat Chimaev has never been under 1.5 his entire professional career. He's fighting the best fighter he's fought. Maybe Gilbert pushes him longer. I don't think so. Gilbert Burns, maybe gets some random leg lock. Maybe, right? At least it covers that. Under 1.5 is plus money, and it won't be plus money for long. So there we go.
Yeah, and I'll be a part of that with you. So with that being said, we can move along. We've got a title fight coming up at the bantamweight division, 135 pounds. Order to be restored. Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan. There will be an undisputed champion come Sunday morning. James, the question is, will it be Aljamain? Will it be coming back to the U.S.? Or will the Ruskies get one over on us? Petr Yan, is he coming home with the belt? How do you feel?
Okay, I'm going to make some people annoyed. I'm going to make some people hate me because it seems like Petr Yan has a lot of hardcore fans. And I understand why. He's a great fighter, right? But I need to dispel some myths, okay? I need to dispel some myths, right? And you know I'm not biased because on the one hand, I'm all over Khamzat Chimaev at minus 500. But let me tell you who I'm not all over at minus 500. Petr Yan, right? these myths I've been seeing on MMA Twitter is that Petr Yan dominated that Aljamain Sterling fight. Excuse me? All right, so the round one was extremely close, okay, until Petr Yan got the knockdown. And by the way, Petr Yan has close fights sometimes until he gets the knockdown, right? Corey Sandhagen was kind of close until he got his time and he dropped him. The Jimmy Rivera fight, was kind of close. Jimmy Rivera maybe winning until he got dropped multiple times. So Petr Yan is that type of fighter where he may be in a close fight, he's making reads, and then he drops you. So I'm not taking anything away from Petr Yan or overhyping Aljamain Sterling. But the fact remains that round 1 and 2 were extremely close, and round 1 and 2, they were 1-1 apiece. Petr Yan won the first round, and Aljamain clearly won the second round. Aljamain got a takedown in that first round, by the way. He's not credited for any takedowns on UFC stats. He's credited for takedowns in my head because I watched the actual fight. So he can take down Petr Yan, although Petr Yan stuffed many after that, I understand. But early, he definitely can take Petr Yan down. He already did it. So I just want to dispel the myths of it was a complete blowout by Petr Yan, right? Now, talking about this fight, it's going to be very hard for Petr Yan to lose this fight, right? So we have to look at things in a balanced view, right? We're not going to say Petr Yan's going to dominate the fight, but at the end of the day, the fight seemed to be going one way, right? That first fight, it was going one way. Petr Yan was pulling away. Aljamain's cardio was letting him down. He was getting stuffed more often than not. His defense was waning a little bit. So Petr Yan was the clear winner of that fight. He was clearly going to win that fight, right? But there is another world where, in my opinion, Aljamain can be a little bit smart. He can conserve his energy a bit more, and he can make it closer than the first fight was, or the first fight was in the third and fourth round. So, look, if the line keeps on climbing, and I'm hoping it does, and I think it will, I will be playing Aljamain Sterling here. I don't think that he's got a very good chance of winning the fight, but you don't need a very good chance of winning the fight when he's plus 400, plus 450, right? So I think Petr Yan's going to win the fight. I think Petr Yan's going to win by decision. I think he's going to win at a very high clip, but maybe not as high as the line's saying at the moment. So that's all I'll say on the fight.
James, it's funny, man. This is the fight that I looked at, and everybody's been saying, it's easy to parlay the 3 favorites and just make that, how we move on with these fights, right? 3 clear favorites, big numbers, parlay them together, run away with it. But you see that there's a little bit more price resistance in one of these matchups than the others, even though everybody's saying that they're parlaying them all together, right? So for me, that was something that stood out as interesting right away. But on top of that, I like to look at fights and I say, okay, how was it lined last time? If it's a rematch, because that tells you a lot of information, right? The closing line, one of the better predictors we have of fight outcomes. So, okay, I'm going to look at that. It was evens, right? It was basically evens. It was pick 'em, slight lean towards Yan at certain points. I think maybe as high as minus 145, minus 135. And, hindsight, maybe that was a sharp bet even. Right now we see what the line is, of course, looks a lot different for this outing. And I think that there's one thing that's just being critically overlooked in the capping of this fight, which is Aljamain Sterling came out and talked about, but I listened to the podcast he did that was like an hour and a half, justifying his existence after that fight. Right. And what he talked about was he's like, listen, I went out there and I'm training in Vegas. I'm doing whatever, meeting with some new guys, have a new camp. And I did some water loading. I tried to make the most optimal weight cut I could. And I felt sluggish. I felt like shit. I had a horrible weight cut. Did that look like a guy who didn't have a horrible weight cut? A guy who's normally physically very strong, very competitive in every grappling scenario is getting easily tossed around and dominated. Is that going to happen again? Maybe it will. Maybe Petr Yan is just that much better, that much more, considered in every grappling position. But I also think that that's unlikely to happen, right? I do think that that was an underperformance from a grappling standpoint. And I thought that it was a pacing problem for Aljamain Sterling. He was going too fast. And that's why you say, the outcome looks inevitable for that fight. It did, because Aljamain was spending himself to zero, right? He was going to be at E before the fight was over. And so then Petr Yan's probably just going to clean up and take him out in those final rounds. That being said, Aljamain looks like he's worked really hard for this fight. Like he's in good shape physically. And he went from being evens, where I was tempted to play him pre-fight, I'll be honest, to now being plus 380, plus 400. That's just a huge, huge, huge correction. You look at something like the Dustin Poirier, Conor McGregor trilogy, right? Conor opened up, big favorite for the first one, he wins it. Then they open it up for the second one. Conor's a big favorite, he loses it. So then they open it up again, and Conor's a slight underdog, very slight underdog, even though 6 months earlier, the guy gets knocked out. And even then, I was like, man, this is a huge correction, even still, where Conor went from being a massive favorite.
Poirier was the underdog. Poirier was an underdog at points. I got him as an underdog even.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. That's one market, right? And obviously, Conor McGregor is kind of a betting outlier. He was freaking like Floyd was like minus 400 or something. So people will make mistakes in a Conor McGregor betting line. We understand this. That being said, much smaller correction on a fight that had a very decisive outcome, right? The extremely decisive outcome. This is a much less decisive outcome. This was a weird fight, played out under a weird scenario, weird circumstances. Now we're going to be in front of a crowd, which I think will affect the dynamic, better or worse, one way or the other. I think we've seen pretty categorically, Russian fighters ain't getting the nicest breaks from the judges, right? So it's like, if you have a close round, I don't know that that should be a primary focus of your capping, but it's something I should definitely consider if I'm laying the minus 4xxx. If I'm saying my guy might not even get a fair shake on the cards, you know? I thought that the Tim Elliott bet was sharp, but Tagir Ulanbekov felt like he was done wrong by that fight. A couple other Russian characters, Askar Askarov, another one, where a lot of the fan base is saying one thing. I think that those are sharp plays, sharp bets, all those things. We're playing for numbers. But when you're looking optically, these guys are like, man, maybe I have to do even more. I have to get even better performance out of myself to get this win across the finish line. So, yeah, am I going to favor Petr Yan? Of course I am. I think that he's one of the better fighters on the planet. But I'm just not going to say Aljamain Sterling's a schlub and a bum and everything else, and that he has no chance to win the fight. I don't believe that. I think that Aljo has shown, you know, look at how long and how back and forth competitive for various points the Petr Yan fight is with Corey. You know, that's a competitive fight. Aljo didn't have a competitive fight with Corey for a second. He took him down and drowned him fast. I don't think that that's ever going to happen with somebody like Petr Yan. I think that he's on from second one in ways that Corey Sandhagen hasn't always been. But I do think that, you know, people are acting like they read Sunday's newspaper on some of these matchups. And I do think John Anik has made the fair point. These are men's title fights in the UFC, very highly competitive affairs. And we're seeing, you know, very steep betting lines given those considerations. But we also have one more fight to discuss. Before we do that, I want to ask the 76 people rocking with us live at 2:43 in the East. God bless you all for staying up late with us. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Put out a lot of great content breaking down these UFC fights. Just did a video that's evergreen. You guys can check it out. 5 lessons I learned betting on MMA for a while now. And this is the guy you really want to learn from, James over here. But what I have learned is a couple lessons along the way where I was making dumb losing bets. I've done a better job of making more better bets over time. And so want to share some of those lessons with you guys. You can check that video out. You can subscribe. You can get a like down on this video. It always helps out. And I really appreciate your support. So with that being said, guys, we are on to the main event of the evening. And, you know, we're spoiled. We're plain simply spoiled, right? We have some of the best pound for pound fighters in the world on this card. And couple of them in a row, right? Petr Yan, he's going to be in most people's top 5, top 10 pound for pound, no doubt. And then you look at Alexander Volkanovski. Man, how is this guy not in your top 3, top 2, top 1? I think he's the best pound for pound fighter in the world right now. And I say that based on my research, right? I go back and watch. It's not just the resume. It's how he's beating these guys. He goes out there and has a tactical battle with Jose Aldo in Brazil, gets the better of him, 30-27 on all cards. In my opinion, he made Aldo fight like Aldo needed to survive, like he needed to hold on, clinch up, you know, find a way to make it to that 15-minute mark, that bell, without getting finished in front of his countrymen. That's truly how I felt watching that fight back on Revisit. In addition, the guy's been put in the worst spots, worst positions, worst scenarios. Chad Mendes, one of the hardest hitters in the division, one of the faster guys in terms of hand speed, pure punching power. He's in there trading in the pocket with Chad Mendes, gets hurt, gets backed up. He's not afraid of that. He literally recomposes. He's firing back. He hurts Chad. He gets him out of there. The guy's will is insane. So then you see, okay, what about, all right, we get one of the best punching threats in the division to hurt him badly. He comes back, rallies, easily finishes the guy. Okay, how about the best stand-up kickboxer in the division? I think most people would say it's Max Holloway, right? Some people would argue Max Holloway even deserves to beat this guy. I don't think so. When I rewatch, what I come away with is close wins for Volk. Man, he just finds a way. And this is against the best guys on the planet. This is against the most elite fighters that we have to put against him in a Max Holloway, who's simply the other standard bearer at 145, right? He also put away Jose Aldo, cementing his legacy. He also went on this run of 14 wins, I believe, in the featherweight division. Just insane metrics for Max Holloway. This guy's got 2 wins over him. This guy snuck the second one out. Some people would argue that first one, he just got him. He got him. He was a better fighter that night. I thought he won that first fight cleanly, as opposed to the second fight where he had to come back from some adversity there. So when I look at danger factors, right, laying minus 800 against a guy like the Korean Zombie, you can't feel good. You can't feel, just warm feelings inside, because this guy hits with a lot of power and he's very fast. He's a little bit tricky, right? Korean Zombie isn't like a lot of elite fighters that you'll watch. Most elite fighters have a lot more movement. They're, introducing feints, threats, a lot of things. Korean Zombie kind of lulls people to sleep sometimes. He's a little bit more stationary. He's a little bit more stoic. He'll move a little bit, but he's also this plus level grappler. He keeps that in his back pocket. He pulled it out against Dan Ige because he needed to, I would argue. He was getting touched a little bit to the body. He didn't like some of those shots from Dan Ige, and Dan Ige, I thought, was starting to get his timing as the fight went on. So I look at this guy and I say, man, Korean Zombie, high-level fighter, extremely skilled, deserves to be in these opportunities, right? He kind of missed some of his fighting prime for reasons outside of his control. Control what you can control. He came back. He's put on a bunch of wars, always said yes when the UFC comes calling. They ask him to do 5-round fight after 5-round fight. The guy never balks at it. He's done a bunch of main events. Frankly, taken too much damage for me at this point in his career, right? You look at the average age of a UFC featherweight, it's 31 years of age, youngest for any men's division. And then when I look at the Korean Zombie, 35 years of age in this fight, that's going to be a little bit too high for me. Volk, he's getting up there himself, right? I think he's like 32, 33, but I think that he is, number one, rounding out his fighting prime. I do think the Korean Zombie missed a bit of that fighting prime. You got to remember, this guy, before he went away for his military service, was fighting for the featherweight title, right? So he's been at this level for a long time, but he's also kind of had that little bit of a level where he can't get past, right? I think that this is that level that he can't get past. I do think that, the Dan Igues, the 10 through 15s, the 8 through 15s, he's going to run through those guys. He might even knock some of them dead. Like, he is just a dangerous, powerful fighter. And he's shown, you put him in there with a guy who's not ready, he's going to hurt him badly. And not the very talented fighter and prospect at the time. I think his durability's improved at 55. But oh boy, Korean Zombie had nothing to hear about that. Sent him down, and the body control in that fight is exceptional. You see a grappler like get controlled like that, you know that he hits hard, and you know that his ground game is very, very good. So when I look at Korean Zombie, I say this is a inside the distance look if you want to bet on the Zombie here, because I think he's going to have such a hard time keeping up with the pace of somebody like Volkanovski over 25 minutes. Volk has shown he can go 25. He can go 25 hard. He can do it with the best guys on the planet. He could do it wrestling. He could do it striking. He could do it inside. He could do it outside. He could do it southpaw. He could do it orthodox. He just can do everything from everywhere too much. And I think that what's going to happen is he's going to overwhelm Zombie. I think that Zombie's going to be confused. I think he's going to be getting hit with clean shots. And I think eventually it's going to be a ground and pound stoppage for Volk, who, basically killed, Brian Ortega in his last fight. And the referee's like, hey, how many fingers? This, that, and the other thing. Giving Brian every chance in the world to survive there. I think Korean Zombie will need, doctor's intervention to save this fight. I think that he's going to get hurt here because Volk, I just believe, is too good a fighter to be beat right now. And I don't think that Korean Zombie is the guy to do it. So if there's a guy at 45, maybe it's the Max Holloway fight. Maybe he needs one more opportunity, one more crack. But really, I just think that this is a guy in Volkanovski who you're going to have to get lucky, or you're going to have to find some guy that I haven't seen yet, because the guy is really goddamn good at fighting. And I think it's going to take a Herculean effort to take the title from him. I think it's probably going to be somebody his junior, not somebody that is his elder, who takes the title from him eventually. So with all that being said, James, I gave a mouthful. I have a pretty strong take on that fight. I am going to be betting on Alexander Volkanovski inside the distance, as I mentioned to you. And I think that he's going to win this fight inside the distance. How do you feel?
Yeah, bro. You broke it down really well, so I'm not going to go too in-depth on this one. I agree with you. I think Alexander probably gets a stoppage in this fight. Zombie's a tough guy, so for me to say that, it just shows you how much I rate Alexander Volkanovski. He's one of the best fighters I've seen ever. Watching MMA, Alexander Volkanovski is one of the best fighters I've ever seen. He won 4 rounds to 1 against Max Holloway in that first fight. Just completely easily won that fight, bell to bell. In the second fight, it was extremely close, 3-2 argument either way. There could be no argument on a winner. The guy's one of the best fighters I've ever seen. I think he's going to be landing tons of offense. His feints are off the chart. I think Zombie is going to get hit with strikes in every part of his body. I think he's going to get hit with leg kicks. I think he's going to get hit with body punches, body kicks. I think he's going to get even hit with head kicks from the short Volkanovski in this fight. He does that lovely little fake head kick, where he comes very low and he just lifts the leg up at the top and he wraps it around your head. So I think he's going to land heavy strikes, and I think the price on Volkanovski, it sounds kind of crazy, but it's fairly warranted. So yeah, I'm taking Volkanovski and taking him for the win as well, for the knockout as well.
James, the other thing I wanted to mention is I got some people here, and I respect the take. Right, they're mentioning the fact that there's not a ton of finishes on the record of Volkanovski, but I think there's a few factors we have to consider. Number one, he's had a lot of guys on the brink of being finished and just couldn't quite get him out of there. But number two, when you look at his pre-UFC footage, when he's fighting guys that aren't quite of that high-level elite tier, he has absolutely proven that he could take those guys out and that his power carries on the feet. Jamie Mullarkey, very tough guy, very durable. We just saw him take an absolute whooping from Jalen Turner before he went down. He got knocked out stiff, cold. That was a bad one. And this man, Volkanovski, he hits hard, man. He can slam you and hit you with ground and pound. He can hit you on the feet. He can head kick you. I've seen a lot of things that make me think he's going to be able to find a shot here. And also, Zombie's just a little bit too hittable. He's a little bit too willing to get hit, and he struggled at times when he couldn't implement that takedown-based offense. I think he's going to struggle to wrestle somebody like Alexander Volkanovski, who's proven, even when he gets taken down, the guy is gritty as shit. And what I love about him is every round he fights for the round, and he lets you know that he won it after the fact. Like, he is a consummate competitor. And for me, it's one of the most fun guys to watch. If you haven't studied his run up the UFC, I would encourage you guys all to do so. It's a great watch, and you'll learn a lot about fighting. The guy has an insane mind for fighting as well. I encourage you to seek out those interviews. I find myself learning something every time I study him. With all that being said, guys, we have done it. We have gone from bottom all the way to the top. 14-fight card. My man James, absolute soldier of fortune, staying with us till the very end. And all you people rocking with us live, 74 of you still here. It is 2:53 in the East, so I can't thank you guys enough for the support. It means a ton. I'm going to be going on vacation, but I will have some more content dropping later this week that you guys can look forward to. As you know, you can find me everywhere at Liam Picks Fights. That's on Twitter. That's on Instagram. That's here on YouTube as well. And if you guys are enjoying this program, please tell a friend about it. Please get subscribed. Share it on social media. All those things sound small, but they make a huge difference for me. I put a lot of time, effort, energy into the research behind the show, as well as setting up the guests, putting in the time, effort, and energy on making this content. So please help make it worth my while. And I'm always going to try and do the same for you. Good guys versus the bookies. That being said, I want to kick it to my man, James, so he can let you guys know all the great places you could find him, the great work that he's doing, and so we could thank him one last time for being on the show tonight.
Yes, brother. I know this has been a long time coming. We was meant to do last week. My fault. I couldn't make that one, but I'm happy to do it for an even better card, UFC 273. I think it's going to be hella fun, and I've had fun tonight breaking down with you. Thanks, everybody, for staying up late, depending on where you are in the world. Liam's the man. It's 3 a.m. almost for Liam, and he's still got that high vibes, that positive vibes, that good energy, putting out content. So I think that definitely deserves a like definitely deserves a subscribe as well. You know, I know you just hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, so congratulations for that, much deserved. Everybody knows where they can find me. You follow me on Twitter, Lucrative MMA, Instagram, Lucrative MMA, my website, lucrativemma.com, lucrativemmabetting.com, I think it is. But yeah, man, just follow me on the socials. Follow me on my Instagram because I'm going to do a breakdown for a couple of the fights. I was going to do full card breakdown, but I've done it here. So follow me on Instagram because I'm going to start putting out more content there. I may give out some bets prior to UFC 273. So that's a good place. And maybe we can do a little video chat as well on there for the people closer to fight day. But yeah, thanks for having me on, brother. Enjoyed it as always. Hopefully we can make some more money this weekend.
Absolutely, James. The pleasure is always all mine. And I just have to say, as we get out of here, thank you guys so much to everybody who is active in the chat. I am constantly reading it. If you guys reply in the comments to this video with questions that you have, with fights that you like, with things that you want to see improved or changed about the show, things that you want to hear more from, let me know in the comments below. I do read and engage with all that stuff, and I truly appreciate it. So thank you guys very much for your time, effort, and energy. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this breakdown. I have had a great time breaking it down for you. It's always a pleasure to shoot the breeze with my man, James. So God bless you all. Enjoy these fights. Good luck with any and all action you decide to take. Always bet legally, responsibly within your means. And until next time, come back. We're going to have all the same fun again. This has been another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. Take care, everybody.